let's talk a little bit about the Susan Rice email that has now been fully unredacted so we can see what was underneath all the black marks, and a little bit more about Michael Flynn and some of the amicus briefs and other stuff that I've got to share with you. So stick with me, folks, and I'll be right back. Hey everybody, this is Deb with Truthfication Chronicles, and wow, we've got the Susan Rice email has been declassified completely and we can see the whole thing. So Catherine Herridge has it on here, and she made a little note here so you know what part of it is declassified. This paragraph right here was all blacked out before, and this is another one that has the copy of it here. So I'm going to bring this up a little bit bigger and you can see it here. Okay, so this is the whole full thing and we've seen it before. Remember that she wrote this, okay, on Friday, January 20th. That was Inauguration Day at 12:33 p.m. And technically, I believe that the new administration started at noon. So technically, she was no longer in that position. It was 15 minutes after that. So just very interesting that she sent it to herself, and she also sent a copy to this Curtis Reed. I don't know who that is. And then there's some little bit here that's still redacted. Don't know why. But we did get at least this paragraph. And this paragraph just goes through and says, Director Comey affirmed that he is proceeding, quote, by the book as it relates to law enforcement. Okay, why would anybody need to say that? All right, unless there were instances where you didn't go by the book and that maybe it was uncommon for you to actually do something by the book. I don't know. I think that phrase right there is just so suspicious. It's very suspicious that she waited, because this is all about a January 5th meeting. And she waited until the 20th to write this. Why? And what my big question is, what plans did they have between January 5th and January 20th that didn't happen, that might have still taken Trump out and that could have prevented him from being inaugurated? Because it sounds to me like she waited until the last minute to get this implemented, because whatever else they had tried in the interim time didn't work. So I can't help but wonder if there were other things afoot during that time that might have eliminated POTUS. And so I don't know. That's just a thought of mine. But anyway, it goes on and says, from a national security perspective, Comey said he does have some concerns that incoming NSA Flynn is speaking frequently with Russian Ambassador Kislyak. Comey said that could be an issue as it relates to sharing sensitive information. What? Wait a minute. We'll get to this. President Obama asked if Comey was saying that the NSC should not pass sensitive information related to Russia to Flynn. Comey replied, potentially. He added that he has no indication thus far that Flynn has passed classified information to Kislyak. He had no information here. Plus, remember, before that January 5th meeting, they already knew it was all bogus. There was nothing to the allegations against Flynn. They already knew that. It's documented. So this is all a big fat lie. He added that he has no indication thus far that Flynn has passed classified information to Kislyak, but he noted that, quote, the level of communication is unusual. All right, so that's what was redacted all this time. We know for sure that they already knew, as of January 5th, that meeting, they knew that Flynn was innocent. He was not in any way having anything to do with the Russians. They also knew that this was when the transition period was supposed to be going on, and he was trying to step into his new position, which would have connected him with the Russians. And we already discussed what the circumstances were for Flynn's phone call on December 29th. So we've discussed all this. But anyway, at this point, they really had nothing on Flynn. And Comey even said this. He said, that he had no indication that Flynn had ever passed anything sensitive on. So what? He's just making it up? It's like, well, I just think that we need to investigate, and we shouldn't allow him to see any sensitive things until we look into it more, even though they already cleared him. Remember? Oh, jeez. These people. Well, this is something you might not know. Comey told Obama that the level of communication between Flynn and Kislyak was unusual. Did Comey count one call that was interrupted 5 times due to Dominican Republic cell phone coverage as 6 calls? Also, how does Comey generally know about the call frequency of an NSA? Yeah, so how would Comey, as the FBI director, know how many times someone who is stepping into the position of the NSA, how would he know how many times that person had talked to someone from Russia? That would not be common knowledge. There wouldn't be any need for that. So there was spying going on, folks. And this one says 5 contacts with Kislyak. This is unusual until you actually realize 3 of the contacts were dropped calls. Was he told 5 contacts or 2 conversations occurred? So when he's talking back here and she says that, it's unusual, the level of communication is unusual. No, it's that he had 1 phone call that was dropped several times, and I think he had 1 other call, or I know he at least texted him when the Russian choir was killed, and so he texted condolences on that. So, that's the situation. I'm going to put these down below. This guy right here, I was watching Dan Bongino, and he mentioned him. He really does have a lot of good tweets. So he's somebody that I wanted to follow, and I want to keep track of his tweeting now because he puts out some good information. And then this one, Byron York says from Michael Flynn, 12920 declaration, which I went through completely the whole thing, I think. And so you can go back and watch that video. And Flynn said, I was never told what was in the 302. Had I been told, I would not have pleaded guilty. And you do remember that. And then he says, document via John W. Huber. Well, this is not the real Huber, okay? This is undercover Huber. But if you don't follow him on Twitter, you really should. He has some awesome stuff here. And every time I read through his threads, it's just like, wow, where does he get this stuff? It is really interesting. So every time I go through here, it's good stuff. Always good things. So I like reading Undercover Huber. Anyway, then we go on to this one. Well, you may not know, but a couple days ago, 12 plus state attorneys general, led by Ohio AG David Yost, file amicus brief in support of DOJ's motion to dismiss without commentary because such punditry disrobes the judiciary of its cloak of impartiality. And here is the document if you want to go and look at that. You can. Here are the states that went with it. It was Ohio, Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Indiana. Yay, Indiana! Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Texas, Utah, and West Virginia in support of the United States. So all of those put in an amicus brief saying, drop it already. The guy needs to have this case dismissed. There's no reason to keep on going. So I thought this was very interesting that she had this. And then Jonathan Turley had a really good post here. It actually links to an article. It's a good article. It's an opinion piece that he did on USA Today. And it's not real long, but it's got a lot of stuff in it. And if you don't know, Jonathan Turley is a professor of law, and he really does a good job with it. He is actually a Democrat, but he does rule things fairly. So I know that seems to be hard to believe these days, but he's more of the traditional type of Democrat. So the Flynn case is fast becoming a case of gross judicial overreach, as the court appears to assume both judicial and executive powers. Sullivan can disagree with the exercise of prosecutorial discretion, but he cannot substitute his own judgment for it. There's the link to the article. And then he goes on and he says there are serious questions about the propriety of third parties being asked to argue against a criminal defendant. The lives and liberty of individuals generally are protected from public demands for punishment. We do not punish by plebiscite in this country. Can you imagine? I mean, essentially it's saying if all the people around you seem to think that you're guilty, even though they haven't seen all the evidence or anything, then you're automatically guilty. I'm so glad we're not governed like that. But that's kind of like popular belief, and it would be a horrible thing that we're governed that way, and that's the way we are judged. But that's kind of what he's trying to do here. But he has several more posts in this thread, and I'll leave the link to it down below, just like usual in the description, and you can read the whole thread on your own. But it's really good. And then I just wanted to post this because just to let you know that this Joe Ray Perkins won the Republican Senate primary in Oregon. And it has a very short little victory speech here that you might be interested in if you follow the 17th letter of the alphabet. And if you take this link to Media Matters, you can find a whole list of people who are running for Congress. So might be people that you want to vote for there. Yeah. Anyway, now you know that President Trump and or Secretary Pompeo fired the Inspector General of the State Department. Okay? Now, Trump actually did the firing, but Pompeo was the one who recommended it to Trump, as I understand it. And depending on what article you're reading, some of them said Pompeo fired him, some say Trump fired him. So I think the case is Trump was the one with the power to fire, but Pompeo recommended that he be fired. I don't know why. I think he was obstructing some things that they were trying to do, and he was an Obama holdover. And Trump did give his people the authority to get rid of Obama holdovers, which is probably the best thing they could have done if they'd have just cleaned them all out when they got there. But, you know, there are so many of them. When you have a switchover like this, it's so hard to get rid of everybody because you got to have people actually doing the jobs. But I just wanted to remind you of this. This was August 6th of 2014. Dozens of inspectors general say federal agencies hindering oversight. Yeah, at least 3 federal agencies have hindered the oversight efforts of independent watchdogs by limiting their access to records, according to a complaint from more than half of the government's inspectors general. More than half. Do you see that? More than half of them. And the officials, 47 of them, signed a letter to congressional oversight leaders on Tuesday saying the Justice Department, the Peace Corps, and the Chemical Safety Board have withheld information on the basis that it was privileged. Okay? And basically it just goes through and it says the Obama administration was stopping them all the time. But did you ever read this in the news? Probably not. You know, I didn't know it was happening. But yeah, this is what they were doing. And so, you know, here Coburn says this is an extremely dangerous place to be for a government established to be of the people, by the people, and for the people. And that they're, you know, keeping these things from them. So I just thought it was very interesting that 47 of them did that. And that was half of the entire force. More than half of the government's inspectors general. But hey, that was Obama, so it was okay, right? This was an interesting article along the same lines because this was actually in 2018 that this came out. But it talks about the silencing of the inspectors general under Obama. And when you go through this, it pretty much lists all the different things that they were doing. And it says McCabe and at least half dozen other FBI employees quit, retired, were fired, or were reassigned as a result of fallout from the politicization of the FBI. Yet, as Barack Obama left office, his chief of staff, Dennis McDonough, strangely boasted that the Obama administration, quote, has been historically free of scandal. Obama himself recently concluded of his 8-year tenure, quote, I didn't have scandals. Those were puzzling assertions given nearly non-stop scandals during Obama's 8 years in office involving the IRS, General Services Administration, Peace Corps, Secret Service, Veterans Administration, and Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, not to mention the Clinton email server scandal, the Benghazi scandal, and the 2016 Democratic National Committee email scandal. So, for nearly 8 years, the Obama administration sought to cover up serial wrongdoing by waging a veritable war against the watchdog inspectors general of various federal agencies. And then it talks about it says 47 of the nation's 73 inspectors general signed that letter. So I just wanted to remind you of that. And then the last thing I'm going to leave you with is this little letter right here from our good friends in the United States Senate, which would be Grassley and Johnson. And this was dated May 19th. I'm recording this on the 19th, so it was dated today, to Ambassador Richard Grenell. And they say, on May 13th, 2020, you provided us with declassified information relating to the unmasking of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, and we very much appreciate your continued commitment to transparency. We write now both to reiterate our request for the declassification of additional items related to the unmasking of Americans around the time of the 2016 election, but also to expand the scope of our request to include information as early as January 2016. Ooh, so they're wanting to move it back because they thought, hey, if they were doing this at the end of the year, what were they doing at the beginning of the year? Yeah, because it was starting to point that direction, that they had this planned long before Trump was actually the candidate. So it's getting there. Based on our investigation and recent press reports, we are increasingly concerned that the surveillance of U.S. persons affiliated with the Trump campaign began earlier than the opening of the FBI's Crossfire Hurricane investigation in late July 2016. As we explained in our May 12, 2020 letter to you, one of the most significant unanswered questions about what occurred during the 2016 election is how many Americans were unmasked, at whose request, and for what purpose. Now, here's just a little aside. I had a couple people asking in the comments. The term unmask means that when the data was collected, the American person was not the target. You see, they can collect data on foreign people who are talking to Americans, but the Americans' data is supposed to be kept masked or hidden, so the identity is not put out there in the intelligence community. But when they want to see that, if they think there's a reason that they need to see that because maybe the person is talking to someone who's a terrorist or something like that, then they can put in a request to have it unmasked. And at that time, then it can be unmasked, but it's only allowed to be shown to the person who actually made the request, and it's not supposed to be spread all around. Well, the problem was people got a hold of the Mike Flynn stuff and it went everywhere. But as I've said before, I'm not real sure. I don't really think that Mike Flynn was unmasked. I think he was the target. I don't think he was collected incidentally. I think he was the target. And so they just didn't even bother. And if there was a FISA on him, which, I'm hearing that there was and there wasn't. I don't know if there was, but if there happened to be a FISA, I tend to think it probably was created kind of after the fact, like after the election, to cover their butts. So I don't know if it was approved then or what. I don't know. I just think that they didn't even bother masking Flynn because they wanted to target him. So anyway, going on. It has become evident that the FBI and possibly members of the U.S. intelligence community were focused on U.S. persons affiliated with the Trump campaign in early 2016, if not even earlier. One example is that in April 2016, FBI headquarters directed its New York field office to open a counterintelligence investigation of Carter Page, which, on August 10, 2016, became part of the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. And he always does a really good job of putting stuff down here. If you want to see that other letter, it's right here and you can follow that. Again, the best way to resolve these issues is to determine the truth and to make clear to the American people what did and did not occur. For these reasons, we respectfully request that you make available to us as soon as possible all information regarding the unmasking of U.S. persons affiliated with the Trump campaign requested by members of President Obama's administration from January 2016 through January 2017. If this request needs to be responded to in tranches, we would appreciate receiving unmasking information relating to the period of April through June 2016 first. Okay, so this is like huge. I mean, I think Grenell will do it. I really do. I don't know how long it's going to take them because they do have to go through it and make sure there's not anything sensitive. But he's going to want to put out as much as he can and redact as little as possible. So I think this is very hopeful. I know that Grassley and Johnson have been working on this for a very long time, and they've really been stonewalled. But it seems to me right now the floodgates have opened because it's time. It's time for all this to come out. And they gave a copy of this to Gary Peters because he's the ranking member of the Senate Committee on Homeland Security. So this is what's happening here, folks. And I think these two guys are going to make it happen. Well, I think Richard Grenell is going to make it happen. So, yeah, Rick Grenell's been our friend, and I think he was put in there for just this time. Going to be an interesting ride, and I can tell you that once Ratcliffe gets in there, I can guarantee this stuff's going to get out. So I am sure the people that don't want all this to come out to the public are like pretty scared right now. Maybe we should start collecting some underwear for them because I think maybe theirs is going to be pretty brown pretty soon. Anyway, that's what I've got for you on this one. I want to thank you for stopping by, and I'll see y'all later.